Climate change poses significant risks to the global community, with fiscal effects causing substantial economic losses. Over the past decade, storms, wildfires, and floods have resulted in substantial GDP losses, and Africa in particular faces severe climate-related challenges, including drought, desertification, increasing cyclones, also leading to the displacement of migration and food crisis. Additionally, African governments' limited ability to respond to the climate crisis due to debt distress and economic shocks necessitates urgent action to provide debt relief and increased liquidity. Now, the Africa Climate Summit proposed a new financing architecture responsive to Africa's needs, including debt restructuring and relief, and the development of a new global climate finance charter through the United Nations General Assembly and the COP processes by 2025. To give proper perspective to this discussion, Alikan Sachu, Africa geoeconomist and CEO, Rich Management, joins me. Thank you so much, Alikan, for talking to us.
It's always a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Now, there is a paradox, even as we see that Kenya, just as Africa as a continent, is on the front lines of the climate crisis and the tabling of probable solutions to climate issues. Now, what were the proposed solutions at the summit, and how viable do you think those solutions are in dealing with the climate crisis?
So basically, I think, one of the most important factors of this summit was its convening capability, the number of serious individuals who can make a difference, who attended it in Nairobi. In Africa's case, the decarbonization story is estimated to cost about $100 billion, in excess of that a year going forward. And clearly, that sort of money is not being raised at the moment. So the idea was to excite and gain real commitments to financing this transition to a decarbonized economy. But, ultimately, the proof is in the pudding. We've had many big, bold promises made before, but the money really hasn't been flowing through. And I think this was an attempt to really kickstart the money flow. And therefore, we can only look to the future to see whether this is effective.
Now, at the summit, various stakeholders and philanthropists made a $23 billion commitment for green growth, mitigation, and adaptation efforts across Africa. Now, you said that it's an excitement. You described it as an excitement, and we've heard stories and some evaluations saying that past pledges have been made but not been redeemed. Should Africa be expectant? Should Africa be hopeful? And also, will that be enough to ameliorate the effects of climate change across the continent?
So I think it's, to reverse the effects of climate change, there is no silver bullet, and it's not going to happen overnight. And we already know that Africa is actually the worst affected by climate change. If you look, globally, particularly in the Sahel belt and that part of Central Africa, which stretches all the way across to Somalia. In terms of, I think what we're really talking about is attempting to future-proof or to proof the future from climate change. So I don't think anything is going to happen overnight, but really, if we can create a greener economy, if we can focus more on green energy, something that the entire globe is trying to do and Africa has in abundance, then I think we can go some way to ameliorating the risks. But I think, this is coming at us. It's a freight train. It's coming at us very, very fast. And I still think overall we remain behind the curve.
Let's now quickly look at what the president of the African Development Bank said. That is Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. He said that Africa must optimize all it has to achieve universal energy access. So what do you think it means by that stance?
So what he's really saying is that we have abundant energy resources, and obviously going forward, we can't go 100% green. It's not possible. Germany keeps trying it and not succeeding. So it's got to be a blend of fossil fuels and green energy. And I think what he's really talking about, which I found interesting because people tend to lose focus on that, is basically allowing every African as a human right the ability to tap into energy. As you know, in most African countries, The penetration, energy penetration remains quite low. Kenya is, of course, an outlier in the sense that the government sought to connect as many people as they could. But so he's talking about the human rights of Africans to access energy. And I think he's absolutely right in that context to put that focus on that element of the narrative.
Well, the African Development Bank also unveiled the Africa Climate Risk Insurance Facility for Adaptation. Can you tell us more about that? Some see it as a buffer, but then what is that about and what can it achieve?
So that's really about helping companies and countries insure themselves against climate risk and access product which can give them that kind of insurance. And of course, if you're going to do it at a continent-wide scale, you've got to go through an entity like the African Development Bank. So again, I think the AFDB is remaining ahead of the curve and seeking to create instruments and vehicles which can work on a continent-wide basis and also be competitively priced. Because one of the biggest challenges we're facing as Africans is that the cost of financing is so high. So even if we want to transition to a green economy, the cost of borrowing those funds make it, in some cases, an uneconomic investment. And I think the AFDB is seeking to play a role in that space.
We're also aware that Africa has been inundated with calls to develop its own carbon market, which is set to be gaining momentum as we speak. So we look at the starting of the properly pricing of its carbon deposits and turning it into vast carbon zinc into new sources of enormous wealth. Now, did the summit put a price tag on this? How can it be achieved? And of course, what value would you place on it in terms of the deposit, the volume, and the accruals on it?
So it's quite a complicated market in the sense that, and there has been reputational risk because a lot of people talk about Western companies greenwashing their pollution through these sorts of carbon markets. But I think it makes sense in the context that in Africa, we do have a surplus carbon sink. We should be able to monetize it. And we should also be able to put that monetization to work in creating a greener economy. So I think that's the context in which I would look at it. And also bear in mind that increased regulation is going to be the main impetus for this market to really develop. And I think that's what we're looking at now.
Let's look at another area of discourse during the climate summit. The chairperson of the African Union, that's Musa Faki Mahamat, used the opportunity to urge participants to not overlook Africa's indebtedness, which of course is a big challenge for Africa as we speak. Now, the public debt stock of sub-Saharan African countries at the end of 2022 was estimated to be around $1.1 trillion. And out of the $650 billion special drawing rights mobilized, Africa released only $33 billion. That's about 4.5% of that. Now, this leads to the debate that loan terms given to Africa are different and pricier than those given to the West. Do you also tilt towards that particular speculation?
Yeah, so one of the biggest challenges for Africa, of course, I mean, there is agency. We did borrow a lot of money when money was relatively cheap. And of course, money has become much more expensive. And in fact, a lot of African countries are currently locked out of the international debt markets. But obviously, there is an argument to say that when Africa goes to borrow, we're borrowing at very inflated rates, given the nature of the credit risk. And I think the argument that's made is that the international markets are punishing Africa unfairly in this context. And of course, it's all come to a head now because we have so many countries which are essentially in debt distress. And there is an argument that at this point in time, we should be looking for some kind of Brady program. Nicholas Brady brought that program for Latin America, a few decades ago, we should be looking and arguing in favor of some kind of Brady program for the African continent in order to help nurse these damaged balance sheets through what are very trying times with Fed funds rates over 5%. Interest rates for Africa have climbed into double digits, and this is not a sustainable situation for the continent.
Ali Kansachu, thank you so much for talking to us. Of course, you are the Africa geo-economist and CEO of Reach Management, rather. Thank you so much for sparing us your time on the show today.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, now the ultimate plan to tackling climate is to reduce carbon emissions and meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, and of course a triple renewable energy capacity by the year 2030. That is the vision, and of course with the hope of doubling it in 2040. Now, after this crucial summit, expectations are set to be high over meeting words with actions, and that is set to be some sort of a collective responsibility coming to play, with these African countries having to come together and collaborate on the agenda they will need to push forward at the global stage in issues of dealing with climate change and its indebtedness to the world powers. And we will hope to see what that can happen. We will hope to see what will happen in the next couple of months or years as regards these issues that are said to be surrounding the African continent. We end Business Edge at this time. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can visit our website, www.newscentral.africa, and download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store. I am Lekon Obanjo. See you some other time. Do stay with us. The news will come your way at the top of the hour.